So is Jesus Christ a fiber-eating weakling? And did he instruct us to follow in these footsteps as well? This seems to be the popular opinion and the general interpretation of the Christian church today. It is more important to be nice than it is to stand for truth. And so I want to look at some biblical examples and some cases from Scripture to see if this is really the case. And there is a very important thing to pay attention here, and it applies to modern times too, and that's a very close attention to words. Think about the word woman. What did the word woman mean 10 years ago? What does it mean today? Well, it's kind of hilarious to watch leftists squirm when they say, we stand for women's rights. And so someone will call in and ask them, like what recently happened on the BBC, well, how do you define woman? What is a woman? And they can't. They can no longer answer it. And so if that's how much a word as simple as man and woman has changed over 10 years, imagine how much the meaning and the context of all of these words have changed. And so to truly understand and appreciate Scripture, you have to really go back and look at what was the real intention of these phrases we hear over and over and over again. And Jordan Peterson, love him or hate him, said something that really got me thinking years ago. And it was this particular verse, the meek shall inherit the earth, which seems to today generally be interpreted as the weak shall inherit the earth. It means Christians seem to always have to be long-suffering. They have to tolerate evil and let it roll right over them and not do anything because your reward will be in the afterlife. But I started to wonder, is this really the case? Because what Peterson said was very interesting. So I'd like to direct you to this blog post by a guy named Keith Harris called Theory to Practice, and he did a very good job breaking this down. And he looked into what Jordan Peterson's research said that led him to the conclusion meek doesn't mean weak. It's actually a bad translation. That's our modern understanding of the term meek. The original translation was something more along the line to skilled swordsmen who keep their weapons sheathed. Blessed are the skilled swordsmen who keep their weapons sheathed. Well, that paints a very different picture of a meek man, not a weak man, not some hippie that lets himself get kicked around and thrown, but, treated like garbage, but someone that is capable of defending themselves, but only does so in the absolute most dire situation and instead relies on negotiation and logic and reason and stoicism. Blessed are those who have swords, know how to use them, but resort to other means whenever possible. That is a meek man. And so going back, let's look at the original Greek in the King James Version. What's being discussed here is a Greek word called praus or pros or something, Praus. The word meek, or praus, is a military term. And even BibleHub.com admits this is a difficult to translate word. Biblical meekness is not weakness, but rather refers to exercising God's strength under His control, i.e., demonstrating power without undue harshness. Blessed are those that demonstrate power, but without undue harshness, a mixture of gentleness and strength. The key here, and what seems to be missed in modern understanding, is strength, is skill, is the ability to defend oneself. So this word meek or praus in the ancient Greek was a word that was applied to the training of war horses. In ancient Greece, wild stallions were captured, assessed, and then trained for riding, racing, or to be worked as beasts of burden. The cream of the crop were readied for warfare. They retained their fierce spirit, courage, and power, but were disciplined to respond to the slightest cue, tactile or verbal, from their rider. They were fearless in the face of mayhem and the chaos of all-out warfare. These specially trained horses were said to have been meeked, M-E-E-K-E-D, and here we see the word meek in its truer form. Yes, you have all the power and strength of a wild man, a Viking warrior, or some fearless spirit, but it's restrained, it's controlled, it's used with reservation. To be a meek man, then, was taken from a state of wild rebellion and to be made completely loyal to and trusting of one's master, not broken, but honed. To be meek is to be taken from a state of fearfulness and made unflinchingly courageous in the presence of danger. Blessed are those who are unflinchingly courageous in the presence of danger. Very, very different interpretation now. And so with this greater understanding of what it takes to be meek, you can see that Jesus himself was not a pacifist. There's the scene in John 2:14 where Jesus goes into the temple and he finds people selling oxen, sheep, and doves, and the money changers seated at their table. He sees that the religious leaders have turned to this in his Father's house of prayer, and he erupts with burning anger and indignation. And he made a scourge, or a whip, of cords, and drove them all out of the temple, with the sheep and the oxen. He poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. So Jesus goes in there into this bank, essentially, full of all these Jewish guys, and all their money and goods are piled up, and he makes a whip, and he whips them all until he drives them out of the bank. Like, can you imagine this in modern times? I think my arm would get tired. I wouldn't have the strength to whip those guys away from their money. But this was a physically violent response on the part of Jesus. He was not a strict pacifist. And since he is considered sinless, in this situation he did nothing wrong. In Luke 22:36-38, Jesus is preparing his disciples for his departure, and he knows that the Jewish leaders are now decidedly against him. In this case, he says, "But now, whoever has a money belt is to take along likewise also a bag, and whoever has no sword is to sell his coat and buy one." So he directed his disciples to sell whatever they had to sell, to go buy swords. Why were the disciples supposed to be carrying swords? Because they look cool? To just never use them? Or were they expected to defend themselves? Why would he have his disciples carry swords? And it's funny, I had this discussion with a pastor, and he didn't even know this. He didn't know this passage when he was saying, well, why do you have a firearm? There's no reason for you to have that. I said, well, Jesus had the disciples carry swords. And he said, no, they didn't. Many people that are dedicated Christians don't even know their own religion. The context here is when traveling from city to city, the roads were often covered with brigands, and so you had to carry a sword to fend off robbers. Jesus had his followers carry swords. This is not the actions of a pacifist. Standing by and refusing to act while harm befalls a neighbor is not a virtue, it is a vice. Just as if I am to observe a RV illegally camping, dumping its black water in the middle of the night into a lake where hundreds of children swim every year, and not say anything because I am concerned about what might happen to the perpetrator, and not the hundreds of children that may sicken or worse, that is not virtue. It's like driving past if you see illegal liquid being dumped into a storm drain or a waterway, I've been told by the fire department, this is an emergency. You are supposed to dial 911. This is handled at the same level as a burning building. You don't drive past, say, a burning school full of hundreds of kids, and you don't call 911 because you're afraid of what might happen to the arsonist. But we've had everything tipped on its head. Everything is upside down. We live in clown world. Well, why is this? Well, it's because we're all swept up in the great cultural game, I'm more tolerant than you. And there's no amount of filth that I'm more tolerant than you won't put up with. And to be clear, you can protect one of two things. You can protect filth or you can protect children. But you cannot protect both. You have to make your choice. You can protect filth or you can protect children. But you cannot protect both. And so you're not called to tolerance. Tolerance is not a Christian virtue. You might say, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, we're seeing the end game of tolerance right now, where everyone is trying to outdo each other. Feminists are fighting trans activists because they're all trying to play in higher and higher form, all essentially one game. I'm more tolerant than you. And this game started in the 60s with the Civil Rights March, and it was in counterpoint to the older game, I'm More Patriotic Than You. So the silent generation was playing I'm More Patriotic Than You, and you can still kind of see vestiges of this game out there. But they won World War II, and so it was very high form, have a flag out in front of your house and bring it in each night. But their children rebelled against this game because they were getting drafted and sent to Vietnam and saying, don't you love your country? Take that hill. And it made no sense. Why are we here in the first place? And so a new game for the past 60 years or so gained steadily in popularity, and it was just showing tolerance for everything. But tolerance isn't a virtue. Tolerance of filth, like tolerating a spouse's alcoholism rather than facing it head on, that's not a virtue. In fact, tolerance and I'm more tolerant than you is actually a twisting of the message of Dr. Martin Luther King. Look at what Dr. King said. Judge a man by his character, not the color of his skin, by his character. But notice that phrase, judge. It is not a call to tolerance. Dr. King was not a call to tolerance. It was for the Christian virtue of discernment. He was inviting us to advance beyond our tolerance, because in those days, if you were white, you tolerated any behavior, no matter how abhorrent, by other whites. You were very tolerant of what the police did to those marchers. Dr. King said we should be more discerning, not more tolerant. I really believe, like this scene at a TJ Maxx in California, where these people aren't even breaking the law, but they're allowed to go and steal up to, I think it's $1,000 worth of merchandise. And you can't call the cops because they need it, because it's mean. Well, this is a wicked state now. It has been conquered by wickedness, and these are the fruits of wickedness. And this is the fruits of the game, I'm more tolerant than you. So tolerance is actually wickedness. If you are enduring evil when you could actually be correcting it, that is wicked. What you need is discernment. Discernment to tell right from wrong, good from evil, and to actually stand and defend the good and the weak. Protect the innocent. Discernment is a virtue. Judge men, but judge them on their essence, not their outward appearance. Now that's very profound. And this is why ultimately you're seeing, I think this is the final melt-up, the great explosion of, and the end of I'm more tolerant than you, and it's being replaced by a new game, which is essentially something like Save Western Civilization, or as Donald Trump has dubbed it, Save America. You're going to see more emphasis on those that are conserving things, conserving the women's bathroom, conserving our history, conserving great writers, conserving great thinkers. People are going to start one-upping each other, and they already are. We already see this game taking hold, where people are doing, I'm doing more to save Western civilization than you. And it's in its early stages, but watch for this game, and it's going to begin replacing I'm more tolerant than you, as I'm more tolerant than you just continues to look more and more ridiculous and insane and even passé. And Save America begins to look a lot more reasonable, like, hey, the very least we had indoor plumbing. I mean, we can deal with some of the policy mistakes. Those are easy enough to correct. And that's why you're seeing these seismic political struggles and these panic by the gatekeepers of the establishment as they begin to lose their hold, because they were masters of controlling people through the game, I'm more tolerant than you. But this new game of Save America throws their entire agenda, their entire hold on power into disarray. They can't let it take hold, and yet essentially it's unstoppable because no game gets played forever. Just like the old-time game of I have more honor than you. Maybe some guys in Mexico still play it, but you don't see duels in the streets anymore to defend one's honor. So keep an eye out on this. You're going to continue to see this rise of this new game, and even play it yourself by reconquering some cultural ground or some political ground, or hey, even some physical ground itself. Take it away from the cult of the uber tolerant and begin using greater discernment. And of course, always keep in mind, blessed is he who knows how to use his sword and keeps it sheathed.